They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I'm 73 years old, and I've never believed that saying more than I do now. My name is William Thornton, and this is the story of how I destroyed 3 men who thought an old man would be an easy target. They were wrong. It started on a Tuesday morning in March, unremarkable in every way except one. I was sitting in my usual spot at Murphy's Diner, reading the newspaper and drinking coffee that was too bitter even by my standards, when Detective Raymond Palmer walked in. Now Ray and I go back 40 years. We served together in the Merchant Marines, saved each other's lives more times than either of us could count. So when he sat down across from me without his usual greeting, without even looking me in the eye, I knew something was wrong. "Will," he said, his voice low and strained, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." I folded my newspaper slowly, deliberately. "When have I ever been anything but straight with you, Ray?" He pulled out a small notebook, flipped it open. "Where were you on the night of March 8th? Between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m.? The question hit me like a slap. "Home. Asleep." "Why? Alone?" "My wife died 6 years ago, Ray. You know that. I'm always alone." I leaned forward. "What's this about?" He closed the notebook, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before when he looked at me, doubt. There was a robbery at Kellerman's Jewelry on Main Street that night. High-end stuff, nearly $200,000 in diamonds and watches. Security cameras were disabled, but we found something at the scene. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photograph. It was a handkerchief, monogrammed with the initials W.T. My blood ran cold, but I kept my face neutral. Years of playing poker had taught me that much. "That's not mine." "Will, those are your initials. And we both know you have handkerchiefs just like this. Your daughter bought you a set for Christmas 2 years ago." I was there. He was right. Margaret had given me a set of 6 personalized handkerchiefs. I'd thought it was an old-fashioned gift, but I used them anyway because she'd chosen them for me. "Ray, I didn't rob Kellerman's. I wouldn't. You know me. I do know you. That's why I'm here talking to you instead of bringing you in. But Will, there's more. They found your fingerprints on the back door, and..." He paused, looking pained. "And there's security footage from the ATM across the street. It's grainy, but the figure, it could be you. Same height, same build, same way of walking." I felt the walls closing in, felt the trap tightening. But even then, even in that moment of pure shock, my mind was working. Because I knew with absolute certainty that I hadn't been anywhere near Kellerman's that night. Which meant someone had gone to considerable trouble to make it look like I had. "Ray, I need you to trust me. I didn't do this. But someone wants it to look like I did, and they've been damn thorough about it." He studied my face for a long moment. "I do trust you. That's why I'm giving you 48 hours before I have to bring this to the captain. 48 hours, Will. Find me something." After he left, I sat there for another 20 minutes, my coffee growing cold, my mind racing. Who would do this? And why? The answer, when it came, was so obvious I almost laughed. Almost. 6 months ago, I'd witnessed something I wasn't supposed to see. I'd been walking home from my weekly chess game at the community center when I saw 3 men loading boxes into a van behind the old Riverside warehouse. It was midnight, and the warehouse had been abandoned for years. My curiosity got the better of me, another trait I've never quite outgrown, and I moved closer. That's when I recognized one of them, Marcus Chin, a local businessman who owned several properties in town, including the warehouse. I knew Marcus casually. We'd served on the town council together years back. But the other 2 men I didn't recognize, and there was something about the way they were working, quick, furtive, constantly looking over their shoulders, that told me this wasn't legitimate business. I'd taken out my phone and snapped a few photos before slipping away. The next day, I'd gone to the police station and shown them to a desk sergeant. I'd filed a report about suspicious activity, given them the photos, and thought that was the end of it. Clearly it wasn't. I left the diner and drove straight to the library. If someone was framing me, they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. I might be old, but I'd spent 30 years as an investigative journalist before I retired. I knew how to dig, how to connect dots, how to find the truth buried under layers of lies. I started with Marcus Chin. The library's computers were slow, but I had patience. I searched for everything I could find about Marcus Chin, going back years. Real estate transactions, business licenses, civil suits, newspaper mentions. I made notes in the small leather journal I always carried, the same kind I'd used for 30 years of reporting. Marcus Chin, 52. Owner of Chin Properties LLC. Married, 2 children. Pillar of the community, or so it seemed. Served on the boards of 3 local charities. Regular donor to the Police Benevolent Association. That last detail made me pause. Of course he'd donate to the police. It was a smart move for someone who might need favors. I dug deeper into his business dealings. Chin Properties owned 14 buildings in town, including the Riverside Warehouse. But as I traced the ownership history, I found something interesting. He'd acquired most of these properties in the last 5 years, always paying in cash, always well above market value. Where was the money coming from? I spent the next 6 hours building a timeline, cross-referencing property records with newspaper archives. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Every time Marcus acquired a new property, there had been a significant theft in town within the following month. Not always in the immediate area, but always within a 20-mile radius. The Riverside Warehouse, acquired July 2023. 2 weeks later, the Grandview Museum was robbed of 3 paintings worth $500,000. The Old Morrison Building, acquired September 2023. 1 month later, a series of home invasions netted thieves over $250,000 in jewelry and electronics. The pattern held for 7 properties, 7 major crimes. But that alone wasn't proof. It was correlation, not causation. Any decent lawyer would tear it apart in court. I needed more. I needed to know who the other 2 men were. The photos I'd taken 6 months ago had been turned over to the police, but I'd done something the criminals couldn't have known about. I'd backed them up to my cloud storage. Old habits. I always kept copies of everything. I'd pulled them up on the library computer and studied each image carefully. The lighting was poor, but in one shot, I'd captured a partial license plate on the van. KJ7-2. It wasn't much, but it was something. I called in a favor from an old colleague, Janet Morrison, who now worked at the DMV. Jan, I need you to run a partial plate for me. I know it's irregular, but... Will, for you? Anything. What V you got? I gave her what I had. It's a white cargo van, probably a 2018 or 2019 Ford Transit. Plate starts with KJ7-2. That's not much to go on, but let me see what I can do. Give me an hour. While I waited, I thought about the handkerchief. Someone had stolen it from me, which meant they'd been in my house. The thought made my skin crawl. I lived alone in a small 3-bedroom home on Oakwood Street, the same house I'd shared with my wife Eleanor for 42 years. After she died, I'd thought about selling, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Too many memories. Now those memories felt violated. I drove home and searched the house methodically, room by room. Nothing seemed out of place, nothing obviously missing except the handkerchief. Whoever had broken in was a professional. But everyone makes mistakes, and I was determined to find theirs. In my bedroom, I noticed something odd. The photograph on my nightstand, a picture of Eleanor and me on our 40th anniversary, was positioned slightly differently than I remembered. I always kept it angled just so I could see her face when I woke up in the morning. But now it was facing more toward the wall. I picked it up carefully, examining the frame. That's when I saw it, a tiny scratch on the wooden nightstand, like something had been dragged across it. They'd moved the frame to access something behind it. But what? Then I understood. They needed my fingerprints. Fresh prints, on something I touched regularly. They must have brought something to lift my prints from the frame, probably one of those forensic-grade lifting tapes. But how did they get into my house? I checked every window, every door. No signs of forced entry. Which meant either they picked the lock, possible, but risky in a neighborhood where people notice things, or they had a key. I only had 2 keys to my house. One on my keychain, which I kept with me always. One in a magnetic box under the rear bumper of my car, a habit from years of locking myself out. I went to my car, an old 2004 Honda Accord that I refused to replace despite my daughter's nagging. Knelt down, felt under the rear bumper. The magnetic box was still there, but when I opened it, the spare key was gone. Clever. They'd taken the key, made a copy, then replaced the original. Except they hadn't. Which meant they'd been interrupted or had made a mistake. My phone rang. Janet from the DMV. Will, I've got something. There are 3 white Ford Transit vans with plates starting KJ7-2 registered in the county. One belongs to a plumbing company, one to a church, and one to a man named David Kowalski. Tell me about Kowalski. Age 34, address is 2847 Industrial Park Road, Unit 12. He's got a record, did 3 years for burglary and possession of stolen property. Released 18 months ago. There it was. The first thread pulling loose. Jan, you're a saint. I know. You owe me lunch. I hung up and immediately searched for David Kowalski online. His social media was sparse. Criminals had learned to keep their digital footprints small, but I found a few photos. In one taken at a bar, he was standing next to another man. I zoomed in on the photo, and my heart rate quickened. It was the third man from the warehouse. The one whose face I'd gotten a clear shot of in my photos. I ran his image through a reverse image search and got a hit on a local boxing gym's website. His name was Tommy Ferraro, listed as a personal trainer. But when I dug deeper, I found mentions of him in a few old newspaper articles about underground boxing matches and suspected connections to organized crime. So now I had 3 names: Marcus Chin, David Kowalski, and Tommy Ferraro. A businessman, a thief, and an enforcer. A perfect criminal team. But why frame me? Why not just? I stopped that thought. Because I'd reported them. And killing a 73-year-old former journalist would raise too many questions. But discrediting me, making me look like a criminal, destroying my reputation? That would neutralize me completely. No one would believe anything I said after that. It was elegant, in a cold-blooded sort of way. My 48 hours were ticking down. I had maybe 36 hours left before Ray had to bring me in. I needed proof, real proof, that would not only exonerate me but expose these 3 for what they were. I needed to think like them. That night I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at Eleanor's photograph, thinking about the problem from every angle. I'd been a journalist long enough to know that criminals, especially organized ones, kept records. They had to. They couldn't possibly remember every detail of every job, every transaction, every payoff. Somewhere, there was documentation. I just had to find it. By morning, I had a plan. It was risky, probably stupid for a man my age, but I was out of options. I drove to the industrial park and found Unit 12, Kowalski's address. It was a small warehouse in a row of identical units, the kind of place where people stored things they didn't want others to see. I parked 3 units down and waited. At 7:30 a.m., a beat-up Chevy Silverado pulled up. Kowalski got out, unlocked the warehouse, and went inside. 20 minutes later, he left again, locking up behind him. I waited another 15 minutes to be sure he wasn't coming back, then approached the warehouse. The lock was new, expensive. I couldn't pick it, not with my arthritic fingers. But I didn't need to. The warehouse had a small window near the roof, probably for ventilation. It was maybe 18 inches square, tight, but I'd been a thin man all my life. The problem was getting up there. I went back to my car and retrieved the small stepladder I kept in the trunk for changing light bulbs. It wasn't tall enough, but stacked on top of a dumpster behind the neighboring unit, it might work. What happened next, I'm not particularly proud of. I'm 73, not 23. But desperation does strange things to a man's judgment. I climbed onto that dumpster, set up my stepladder, and hauled myself up to that window. My shoulders screamed in protest, my knees threatened to give out, but I made it. The window wasn't locked. Why would it be, 20 feet off the ground? And I squeezed through, dropping down onto a stack of wooden pallets inside. The warehouse was dim, lit only by the light filtering through dirty windows. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw what I'd hoped to find: filing cabinets, boxes of documents, a desk with a laptop. I started with the filing cabinets. They were locked, but the locks were cheap, and I had my Swiss Army knife. It took me 10 minutes, but I got them open. Inside, I found the mother lode. Receipts for stolen goods, organized by date. Photos of jewelry, art, electronics. Sales records showing items sold to various buyers, mostly out of state. And best of all, ledgers showing payments to 3 parties, identified only by initials, M, C, D, K, and T, F. Marcus Chin, David Kowalski, Tommy Ferraro. I took photos of everything with my phone, hundreds of them, making sure I got every detail. This was evidence that would stand up in court. But then I found something that made my blood run cold. In a manila folder labeled W.T. Project, I found a complete dossier on me. Photos of my house, my car, my daily routines. Copies of my fingerprints. They must have gotten them from somewhere before breaking into my house. A timeline of their plan to frame me for the Kellerman's robbery. And most chilling of all, a backup plan. If the frame job didn't work, if I somehow proved my innocence, they had an alternative. They were going to stage a break-in at my house and make it look like I'd been killed during a robbery gone wrong. They were planning to murder me. I photographed the entire folder, my hands shaking with a mixture of fear and rage. These men had planned not just to destroy my reputation but to end my life, and they'd done it with the cold efficiency of people who'd done such things before. I was about to leave when I heard a vehicle pull up outside. Doors slamming. Voices. They were back. I moved quickly, quietly, climbing back onto the pallets and squeezing through the window. I was halfway through when I heard the lock turning on the main door. I pulled myself the rest of the way out, and dropped to the stepladder just as I heard voices inside. "Told you we should have checked it this morning." "Relax, Chin. Everything's locked up tight. The old man's probably sitting in a cell by now, trying to convince everyone he's innocent. I climbed down as quickly as my protesting joints would allow, grabbed my stepladder, and hurried back to my car. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give out, but I'd made it. I had the evidence. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to make sure it reached the right people, and I needed to ensure that when it did, these three couldn't wriggle out of it. I needed an insurance policy. I drove to a copy center and spent the next 2 hours making duplicates of everything I'd found. I created 3 complete sets of documentation, storing them in 3 different locations, one in a safe deposit box at my bank, one with my lawyer, and one with Janet at the DMV, sealed in an envelope with instructions to open it if anything happened to me. Then I did something that surprised even myself. I called Marcus Chin. "Mr. Chin, this is William Thornton." There was a pause on the other end. "Mr. Thornton, what can I do for you?" His voice was smooth, professional. No hint of concern. He was good. "I think we should meet. I have something you want, and you have something I want." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm not sure I understand." "I think you do. I'm sitting in Riverside Park, on the bench by the fountain. Come alone. We'll talk." I hung up before he could respond. Riverside Park was public, well lit, with good sight lines in all directions. If they tried anything, there would be witnesses. And I'd chosen a bench that was visible from the security camera at the nearby convenience store. I waited. 20 minutes later, a black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. Marcus Chin got out, looked around carefully, then walked toward me. He was a handsome man, I had to admit. Well-dressed, confident. The kind of man people instinctively trusted. Which made him all the more dangerous. "Mr. Thornton." He sat down on the bench, maintaining a careful distance. "This is unexpected." "I'm sure it is. Tell me, Mr. Chin, did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" His expression didn't change. "Figure what out?" "The frame job. The planted evidence. Your little operation with Kowalski and Ferraro." Now I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not fear, but calculation. He was reassessing me. "Those are serious accusations. Do you have any proof?" "Enough to put all 3 of you away for 20 years. Maybe more." He smiled then, and it was a cold, reptilian expression. "Then why are we having this conversation? Why not go to the police?" "Because I'm a pragmatic man, Mr. Chin. I'm 73 years old. I don't have 20 years left to spend sitting in courtrooms, testifying, watching lawyers play their games. I want a simple solution. Which is? You clear my name. You plant evidence that points to someone else. I don't care who, make someone up if you have to. You make the Kellerman's job go away, and I forget everything I know about your operation." He studied me for a long moment. "And if I refuse? Then every piece of evidence I have goes to the FBI, the state police, and the press. Your operation ends, and you spend the rest of your life in a federal prison." He was quiet for a moment, thinking. I could almost see the wheels turning in his head. "Even if I wanted to help you, and I'm not saying I do, how would I explain away the evidence? Your fingerprints, the handkerchief, the security footage? You're a creative man. You'll figure it out. Maybe the handkerchief was stolen from my house months ago. Maybe the fingerprints were transferred somehow. Maybe the footage was doctored or misidentified. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And the evidence you have against me? Disappears. All of it. I'm not interested in being a hero, Mr. Chin. I'm interested in living out my remaining years in peace." He nodded slowly. "I'll need time to think about this. You have 24 hours. After that, the evidence goes public. I stood up, walked back to my car, and drove away. I watched in my rearview mirror as he pulled out his phone, undoubtedly calling Kowalski and Ferraro. The trap was set. Of course, I had no intention of letting them get away with it. The meeting with Markuschen had served two purposes. First, to put them off balance, to make them think I was negotiable, that I was scared enough to deal. Second, and more importantly, to see how they'd react. I knew men like Chin. He'd never agree to my terms. He couldn't. Because once he cleared my name, once he made the Kellerman's evidence disappear, I'd have all the power. I could go to the authorities at any time, and he'd have nothing to hold over me. No, he'd tried to eliminate the threat permanently. Which meant they'd come for me. And I was counting on it. I drove home and prepared. I might be old, but I wasn't helpless. I'd covered wars as a journalist, been in combat zones, learned a thing or two about staying alive when people wanted you dead. First, I set up my house with the kind of security I should have had all along. I installed wireless cameras at every entrance, linked to my phone and to cloud storage. I set up motion sensors in every room. I even rigged the back door with a small bell, something they wouldn't notice but that would alert me if anyone tried to enter. Then I called Ray Palmer. Ray, it's Will. I need you to trust me on something, and I can't explain it yet. Will, you've got 18 hours left. If you're calling to confess. I'm not. I'm calling to tell you that tonight, probably between midnight and 4 a.m., there's going to be an attempted break-in at my house. When it happens, I need you to come immediately. Don't call for backup, don't alert anyone else. Just come. Will, what the hell are you planning? Justice, Ray. I'm planning justice. Will you be there? He was silent for a long moment. I'll be there. But Will, if this is some kind of... It's not. I promise you, everything will be clear by morning. I hung up and settled in to wait. The house was dark except for the soft glow of my phone screen, showing the feeds from the security cameras. I sat in Eleanor's old reading chair in the living room, a blanket over my lap, looking like an old man dozing in his chair. But I was wide awake. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. At 2:47 a.m., the motion sensor on my back porch triggered. I watched on my phone as two figures approached the back door. Even in the infrared camera feed, I recognized them, Kowalski and Ferraro. They were good. They'd picked the lock on my back door in under 30 seconds. The little bell I'd rigged tinkled softly, and they froze, listening. When nothing happened, they continued inside. I didn't move. I stayed in my chair, eyes closed, breathing slowly and deeply, playing the role of a sleeping old man. I heard them moving through my kitchen, their footsteps careful but audible. They were trying to be quiet, but the old house creaked and settled, betraying their presence. They entered the living room. I felt rather than saw them stop, taking in the sight of me in the chair. He's asleep, Kowalski whispered. Make it quick, Ferraro replied. In and out. I heard the distinctive sound of a gun being cocked. Gentlemen, I said, opening my eyes. I've been expecting you. They both jumped, startled. Ferraro's gun swung toward me, but he hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, headlights flooded through my front windows. A car door slammed. That would be Detective Palmer, I said calmly. He's been waiting in his car down the street for the last 3 hours. And before you think about running, you should know that every entrance to this house is being recorded. Your break-in, your weapons, everything. It's all documented. The front door burst open. Ray Palmer entered, weapon drawn, his eyes taking in the scene in an instant. Police! Drop your weapons! Hands where I can see them. Kowalski and Ferraro looked at each other, calculating their odds. Ferraro's finger tightened on the trigger. Don't, I said quietly. You're already looking at breaking and entering, attempted murder. You pull that trigger, you'll never see daylight again. And Marcus Chin will throw you both under the bus to save himself. You know he will. The truth of that hung in the air. Slowly, Ferraro lowered his weapon. They arrested Kowalski and Ferraro right there in my living room. Ray called for backup, and soon my small house was full of police officers, crime scene technicians, and curious neighbors. But I wasn't done yet. Ray, I said, pulling him aside. There's something you need to see. I showed him everything. The photos from 6 months ago. The documentation from Kowalski's warehouse. The dossier they'd compiled on me. The plan to frame me for Kellerman's and, failing that, to kill me. His face grew darker with each image. Will, this is... Jesus! How long have you known? I figured it out yesterday. All of it. And you didn't call me? You set up this elaborate trap instead? Because I needed them to make a mistake. I needed proof that would hold up in court, not just coincidence and circumstantial evidence. I needed them to show their hand. He shook his head, but there was admiration in his eyes. You could have gotten yourself killed. I'm 73, Ray. I've had a good life. But I wasn't going to let them destroy my name or hurt anyone else. Over the next few hours, under interrogation, Kowalski cracked. He gave up everything, the entire operation, Marcus Chen's involvement, the list of robberies they'd committed over the past 3 years. The total haul was close to $3 million. But Marcus Chen was smart. When the police went to arrest him, he was gone. His house was empty, his car abandoned at the airport. He'd run. For a moment, I thought he'd gotten away. But I'd planned for that too. 2 days after the arrests, I received a call from an unknown number. Mr. Thornton, this is Special Agent Sarah Mitchell, FBI. I understand you have information about Marcus Chen's whereabouts. I might, I said carefully. But first, I need to know something. The information I provided to the police about Chen's criminal operation, is it enough to convict him? More than enough. Between your documentation and the testimony from Kowalski and Ferraro, we have an airtight case. Mr. Chen is looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison for racketeering, theft, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Good. Then I can tell you where he is. You know where he is? I do. But first, you should understand something about Marcus Chen. He's a planner. He's careful. He wouldn't run without having an escape route planned well in advance. We're aware. We've flagged all airports, bus stations, and border crossings. That's not how he's leaving. 3 years ago, Chen Properties purchased a small marina in Clearwater. The property is registered under a shell corporation, but I traced it back to Chen. At that marina, there's a 40-foot yacht named Second Chance. Chen's been preparing that boat for years as his emergency exit. It has enough fuel to reach international waters, enough supplies to last for weeks. There was a pause on the other end. How do you know all this? Because I'm a very thorough man, Agent Mitchell. And because I've spent the last 48 hours tracking every property, every asset, every possible escape route Marcus Chen might have. That yacht is his endgame. We'll send agents immediately. You'll want to hurry. According to the marina's security logs, which I accessed through a friend who does IT work, someone logged in to check the boat 2 hours ago. He's probably there now, preparing to leave. Mr. Thornton, this information, How did you obtain it? I'm an old man with insomnia and too much time on his hands, Agent Mitchell. What matters is whether you want Marcuston or not. We'll move on it immediately. Thank you. I hung up and turned on the news. Within 3 hours, every channel was covering the story. FBI agents had intercepted Marcuston as he attempted to flee the country on his yacht. He'd resisted arrest and was being charged with additional counts of evading justice. The following day, the district attorney held a press conference announcing the breakup of a major theft ring operating in the region. They mentioned the cooperation of an unnamed local citizen whose investigative work had been instrumental in solving the case. That unnamed citizen was me, but I didn't need the recognition. I'd achieved what I set out to do. The charges against me were dropped, of course. The district attorney personally apologized for the investigation, though I waved it off. They'd been doing their job. Ray Palmer came to visit me a week later. We sat on my back porch, drinking beer and watching the sunset. "You're a crazy old man, you know that?" he said. "I've been called worse. The FBI is still trying to figure out how you tracked down all that information. They've got entire teams of analysts who couldn't find half of what you did. I had motivation they didn't. And I knew how criminals think. 30 years of investigative journalism teaches you a lot." He shook his head. "You could have been killed, Will. If anything had gone wrong. But it didn't. Because I planned for every contingency. Because I knew these men, knew how they'd react, knew what they'd do." "How did you know they'd come for you that night?" "Because I backed them into a corner. I gave them a choice, deal with me or lose everything. Men like Marcuston don't make deals when their backs are against the wall. They eliminate threats. Still, it was a hell of a risk." I took a long drink of my beer. "Ray, after Eleanor died, I spent 6 years just existing. Going through the motions. Waiting to die. Then these bastards came along and tried to destroy everything I'd built, everything I'd stood for. They tried to make me look like a criminal, and if that didn't work, they were going to kill me. You know what that did?" "What?" "It reminded me that I'm still alive. That I still have something to fight for. That I'm not ready to just fade away." He laughed. "Well, you certainly didn't fade away. You took down a criminal organization single-handedly." "Not single-handedly. I had help. From you, from Janet, from good people who trusted me." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to purple to deep blue. "What will you do now?" Ray asked. "I don't know. Maybe I'll take up a hobby. Woodworking, perhaps. Something peaceful." He gave me a skeptical look. "Somehow, I don't see you doing peaceful." I smiled. "You're probably right.